Before, there's a renewed call for justice, equality, and accountability, and it's sweeping the globe right now. And we're glad to be a part of it. A movement has actually begun, and moments become movements when they catch on and they have action steps. And for Clergy Calling for Consequences, that all began with the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. That's when Clergy Calling for Consequences was birthed, and it was intentionally across ethnic and denominational, even interfaith lines. We had a call to action because often we talk about things, but we don't actually take action. So we asked people if they would sign the petition calling for the arrest and the murder charges of Ahmaud's killers, call officials in Brunswick, Georgia, to make sure that the cover-up came to an end and the rest actually happened, to donate to Arbery's family's legal fight, and to educate themselves, as we said at the top, to watch the video, to see this long history. And we wanted everybody to invite others to sign, to call, to donate by sharing the video. Even though there have been arrests in the Ahmaud case, the video is still important because we don't yet have justice for Breonna Taylor. And we do need folks to text enough to 55156 to get justice for her.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Patterson. So for those of you who are just joining us, I'm Reverend Donna Owusu-Ansah, and we are graciously led by our curator, Reverend Dr. Carol Lynn Patterson. And when Dr. Patterson first contacted me about being part of this movement, I was really excited to lend my gifts and my voices to the struggle in this way. Dr. Patterson invited clergy from across the country to support the cause, and we were so excited that clergy responded, that they really got involved and were on top of things to be a part of this movement. And we're also excited because we are still adding people to our alliance. So that's just a quick plug. If you are clergy and you would like a Clergy Calling for Consequences frame so that you can post social media across the platforms, just send me an email at Donna-Olivia, that's Donna-Olivia@hotmail.com, and I'll be excited to make one for you because the movement is growing.
Unfortunately, it is. I say unfortunately because we would hope that there wouldn't be incidents that we have to call consequences for. But because there are, people of faith belong at the forefront of this right to life issue. We have evangelicals, conservative Christians, right-wing people talking about right to life when it has to do with the woman's right to choose or abortion, but people who are alive have a right to live. So I'm glad that clergy who feel convicted are joining us to make more than a statement. We're lifting our prophetic voices and taking some action.
And it's important to say that as we were finishing up the production on the Ahmaud Arbery video, news of Breonna Taylor's murder began to spread. And on the heels of that news, the world saw the horrific murder of George Floyd. And even since then, we are still having our brothers and sisters murdered by police. And while we're developing the call to action for the arrest of the Minneapolis police involved, arrests were made in response to the public outcry, but we're still calling for more consequences.
Absolutely. Even though they have banned no-knock warrants in Louisville, there still have not been any arrests in Breonna Taylor's murder. So please do text enough to 55156. We need criminal charges and arrest for Breonna Taylor.
And in the midst of all of this, there's been a worldwide Black Lives Matter movement. And so we updated our video because our video actually became outdated the moment we posted it. And so we've updated the video, which we showed before in our other live session. We'll show again at the end of this if you're interested in it. And just this weekend, our video became outdated again when police officers in Atlanta shot 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks in the back of the head as he ran from them. And so, you know, sadly, our video keeps being outdated, but what is good is that we can continue to call for consequences, and all of us, clergy and people of faith alike, can continue to raise our voices.
Absolutely. As soon as there are some specific steps that can be taken in the Atlanta incident, or even in Palmdale, California, where 24-year-old Robert Fuller was found hanging from a tree near City Hall. The police were so quick to call it a suicide. How does a young man hang himself from a tree? The community asked, and they're pushing for a homicide investigation. So because we are clergy, we lift prayers for Rayshard Brooks and Robert Fuller. And I'd like to ask if everyone would even join us in prayer right now, because the word of God is true. Where two or three are gathered, whether it's on Facebook or face-to-face and holding hands. So let's lift up a prayer for the Brooks and the Fuller families right now. Gracious God, we come together thanking you that we are able to come together, thanking you for all the protests that continue around the world, even as we speak right now. We ask that you would give us a sense of peace and purpose in the midst of all these protests and all of this pain. Watching the news has become traumatic. It was difficult when it was just the pandemic, but it's beyond exhausting now when every day we see the face of another Black man, another Black woman, another Black life senselessly taken by those who are supposed to protect and serve us. God, help us not to become bitter. Help us to not have our love grow cold because of increased wickedness. Help us to be clear that we appreciate those police who protect and serve us with integrity. We know that it's not an easy job and we are grateful for them, but we cannot be silenced in calling for justice against those who cross the line, against those who take life that is not theirs to take. God, we lift up right now the Brooks family. We know that the last thing they expected in the midst of everything that's happening is to receive news that their son, their brother, their cousin, their friend, their loved one was killed by police. Comfort like only you can. Send people around them that will be sensitive, that will be supportive. God, we lift this Fuller family to you. How horrific it must be in 2020 to have a loved one found hanging from a tree. And how heartless it is for police to have the audacity to say, can we not talk about lynching? God, we don't want to brush over these incidents. We don't want to just make hashtags and raise fists. And this is a life, God. These are lives. These are people who matter. Give us the sensitivity to be mindful of these families, and not only these families, but even the families of good police officers who I'm sure can't stand to hear all this talk against police. Make us mindful that there are some good cops, but make them open to justice being called against the bad ones. Help us all as we struggle to find space in this movement to lift our voices in love, first of all, for Christ Jesus, and second, for our neighbor. Have your way in this move of change that's not only sweeping America, but the world. In every other city where there are protests about racism, about anti-Blackness, about injustice, about inequality, we know we don't have to dispatch you. We know you're there. But we ask that you would allow us to hear the news of the progress. We praise you even now as we talk about all of these negative incidents. We praise you that in California, a reparations bill has passed the assembly. We praise you that in New York, the governor has passed a say their names legislation that bans chokeholds, and that goes even further and requires every mayor in every city to have a plan for comprehensive police reform or to lose state funding. God, I never thought there'd be a day when we would pray to you about the events in the news in the way that we are right now. But we know, just like you brought us as a people out of slavery through Jim Crow, you are with us now and you have a plan to give us hope and a future. So we trust you, we believe in you, and we ask that you would continue to empower and strengthen us as we fight this fight for justice. I thank you for Reverend Donna and her gifts and her talent and her skills and her willingness to edit this video and to make these frames, and for all the clergy who said yes to the call for consequences, for those who are with us now and who may even decide to join us, or whatever they do to lift their voices and take some action in this fight. I ask that you would get the glory, because we know it's your will for us all to be one human race. So in the name of Jesus, we thank you. And together we say amen.
Amen.
Can you tell I'm a Baptist preacher who hasn't had a chance to do altar prayer in a minute? That was long. I'm sorry, y'all, but that was a prayer.
You sent up some timber. Yes, indeed. And so let us share the video now. It's like we said, it is tragic that this has to exist. It's unjust, yet making it, watching it, and doing something about it, about the murders, is meaningful. Please, please, please respond to the call to action concerning Breonna Taylor and Rayshard Brooks, and also Robert Fuller, and all those whose names we are saying, for whom justice has yet to be served. And so,
if you have time, stick with us, because we're going to talk about the purpose of clergy calling for consequences afterward.
yes, indeed.
Each time a racist killer is acquitted, has charges dismissed, or isn't even indicted, others are emboldened to do more of the same. Too many have fallen victim to unprosecuted hate crimes. Say their names with us at the end of this video.
We're a concerned group of clergy seeking justice for Ahmaud Arbery. We encourage you to join us in speaking truth to power. And we appreciate those police officers who serve and protect our communities with integrity, but we're calling for legal consequences against those who abuse their power.
More than a decade ago, an unarmed 23-year-old Sean Elijah Bell was cut down in a hail of over 50 bullets fired at him by New York City police officers. Although criminal charges, were filed against 3 of the 5 officers involved, a judge later dismissed them.
There was no justice for Sean Bell or any of the others discussed in this video. That's why we are an interfaith clergy alliance coming together from across the country to encourage you to join us in calling for legal consequences in the case against Ahmaud Arbery's killers.
8 years ago, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was walking home from a convenience store with a bag of Skittles and a bottle of iced tea, and he was shot and killed by an overzealous neighborhood watch volunteer. After public outcry, his killer was charged with second-degree murder, though ultimately he was acquitted.
George Zimmerman's father is a judge. His connections to the court contributed to the attempted cover-up in Sanford, Florida. The same thing happened in Brunswick, Georgia, with retired police officer Greg McMichael. 4 senseless murders of Black men in the same year. Not one of them considered a crime. Join us in calling for consequences this time.
7 years ago, Jonathan Farrell, a 24-year-old college football player, was shot 10 times by a Charlotte Mecklenburg police officer while seeking help after a car accident. In one of the rare instances where an aggressive officer was charged and brought to trial, the case ended as a mistrial with a hung jury. No conviction.
6 years ago in July, unarmed 43-year-old Eric Garner was choked to death by a New York City police officer. The crime was captured on videotape. The United States Department of Justice did not file federal civil rights charges against the officer.
On August the 5th, John Crawford III was shopping in a Walmart in Beaver Creek, Ohio. He was gunned down by 2 police officers. A grand jury failed to indict Crawford's killers.
5 days later, unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown Jr. was killed by a Ferguson, Missouri police officer. His body was left in the street for 4 hours. No charges were filed against the officer who killed him.
That November, Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy, became the 4th black male to be killed by police. Rice was shot and killed within seconds of Cleveland, Ohio police pulling up to the playground. The officers did not take the time to identify themselves or ask Tamir to put down the toy gun. Despite discrepancies in their accounts before the grand jury, neither officer was charged with the crime.
A long string of heinous crimes against young black men without any legal ramifications. Let's do all we can to get justice for Ahmaud.
5 years ago, 25-year-old Freddie Gray died from spinal injuries resulting from his neck being snapped while he was in the custody of Baltimore police officers. There were no federal civil rights charges.
The Arbery family is facing a long legal road ahead. Let's do what we can to help them, fellow clergy, in their struggle for justice to prevail against their murderers, the murderers of Ahmaud Marquez Arbery.
4 years ago, on July 5th, 37-year-old Alton Sterling was shot dead at close range by 2 police officers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, for selling CDs. Their use of excessive force was captured by bystanders, cell phones, and security cameras, yet no state or federal charges were filed.
The very next day, 32-year-old Philando Castile was shot 7 times within 40 seconds of a routine traffic stop in St. Anthony, Minnesota. Despite dash cam footage and cell phone video, the officer was acquitted.
Just 2 months later, in September, 40-year-old Terrence Crutcher, an unarmed black man, was having car trouble in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 4 police officers arrived on the scene. One of them shot and killed Crutcher. The shooting was deemed tragic, but justified.
On February the 23rd, unarmed 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was jogging. He was shot by former police officer Gregory McMichael and his son Travis McMichael. The father-son duo grabbed their shotguns, got in their pickup truck, and chased Ahmaud down as if they were hunting for sport. They had 2 accomplices. Had the public not seen the video, there would not have been any arrests.
In order to ensure that justice prevails in Ahmaud's case, we need to keep the political pressure on. Call the authorities, sign the petition, and donate towards the family's legal battle.
So many sisters and brothers snuffed out because of the color of their skin. We're clergy calling for consequences because something must be done to change this trajectory.
Lest we forget those who rest in power, whose killers were not convicted despite the preponderance of evidence against them. Please say their names. Amadou Diallo, Travaris McGill, Sean Bell, Ayanna Stanley Jones, Oscar Grant, Kenneth Chamberlain, Trayvon Martin, Rekia Boyd, Kamani Gray, Jonathan Farrell, Eric Garner, John Crawford, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Betty Jones, Quintonio LeGrier, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, Stefan Clark, Breonna Taylor.
May the fallen rest in power, and may justice be served in the trials that are pending.
We are clergy coming together across denominational and ethnic lines to seek justice for Ahmaud Arbery. Please join our call for consequences. Sign the petition, donate to the family's legal battle, call officials in Georgia, and invite your family and friends to do the same. And certainly we're hoping that you will join us.
While we were in the process of supporting justice for Ahmaud Arbery, to have all of his killers arrested and charged with murder, news of the legalized killing of Breonna Taylor broke. You can help us support justice for Breonna Taylor by texting ENOUGH to 55156. That will enable you to sign a petition that calls for consequences. The arrest of all 3 cops and having them charged with murder. Just days after news of Breonna, the world saw George Floyd choked to death by a police officer on national television. Help us call for consequences for all of the officers involved in his murder, for the actions taken and the inactions of those who refuse to help. Text justice to 668-366. Again, you'll have the opportunity to call for consequences for the arrest and murder charges for all of the officers involved. Please pray with us for justice, for peace, for righteousness, for a change in this trajectory, for America to be all that America promises to be. We are called to change this trajectory. Call for consequences. Take some action. Let's do justice. Love mercy. Walk humbly with God. Someone asked if they could use the video in their groups, and the answer is absolutely yes. You can find it on my website or Reverend Donna's. Mine is setcaptivesfree.com, setcaptivesfree.com. Reverend Donna, please give your website information.
My website is www.reverend, all one word spelled out, Donna, DONNAO.com. So www.reverendonnao.com.
So either website, you can download the video and you can use it however you find it to be instructional or helpful. We wanted to share with you a little bit about the mission of Clergy Calling for Consequences. And just before we went into the video, Reverend Donna said, if there's any clergy who wants to be a part, you can email her. Please give your email address again.
Yes, my email address is Donna, DONNA hyphen Olivia, OLIVIA @hotmail.com. That's Donna, DONNA hyphen Olivia @hotmail.com. And just a note, I generally work on the frames on Thursdays. So you have between now and Thursday to get a high resolution picture to me, along with your name, your title, your ministry affiliation, and the city and state. And I will get that back over to you Thursday evening.
And just so you know, it's not a selfie campaign. We use these images to call the people that we have influence with to action. The current call to action is for Breonna Taylor. And I know we keep saying it, but we can't say it enough. It's please text ENOUGH to 55156. That will call for the arrest of the officers who killed her and murder charges. Because right now, all Louisville has done is ban no-knock warrants. We want justice for Breonna. So Clergy Calling for Consequences, as you saw by watching the video, is a diverse group of interfaith clergy. And we came together to lift our prophetic voices. We're calling for action against social injustices, but there's so many and we can't do everything. If each person does what they feel called to speak about, everything will be taken care of. And our particular focus is on seeking justice for Black people who are murdered by the police. We want to call for police accountability and take specific action each time there is an incident. As we said at the top of this conversation, the first thing that we called action for was Ahmaud Arbery's killers to be arrested and charged with murder, to donate to his family's legal fight, to watch and share this video. As Reverend Donna mentioned, the video has been updated to include Breonna and George Floyd, but we can't keep adding to it every time something happens in real time because we're clergy and not CNN. Once we have more specifics, we will probably add to it so that it can be a useful tool in real time. And we'll work with Clergy, who's part of our alliance, to do that. Reverend Donna, do you mind sharing our national agenda?
Sure. On a national level, we're supporting the Congressional Black Caucus in pushing Congress and the federal government to pass laws and utilize federal oversight to, number one, stop the assault on Black Americans, and number two, to protect peaceful protesters' constitutional rights. We are aligned with the United for Reform agenda action items on police reform, and Dr. Patterson will tell us more about those.
I'm happy to share. And United for Reform is the largest collective of Black women-led and Black women organizations. It has my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha. It has Delta Sigma Theta. The links, there's a list of the organizations on my website, setcaptivesfree.com. It will also be on Reverend Donna's. Reverend Kelly Farrell, who's part of Clergy Calling for Consequences, has already posted the agenda on her page for those of you who like to read and see things. But I'm going to tell you what points United for Reform is calling for. There's a full agenda that you can see on the different websites of the organizations that I just named, and I'll name all the organizations after I share the points, because there's probably people on the phone who are part of other groups and you want to hear your organization shouted out. But the agenda is to decertify or terminate police officers who use lethal force in nonviolent offenses, to eliminate the use of chokeholds in all forms, to create a national database or registry that will restrict the rehiring of law enforcement officers that were terminated with cause by other cities and states. Because right now, a police officer could be fired from one place and go work at another. To require all police officers to wear body cameras and to terminate any officer who intentionally turns off his or her camera. And to require de-escalation training and unconscious bias training for all police officers. This is so important because if they approach us in fear and the first thing to do is shoot when you're scared, you don't belong on the force. The agenda continues to require psychological evaluation of police officers before hiring and periodic evaluations while they are employed. Because just like ministry gets us tired, policing can change the state of mind that they started with. I'm offering a lot of commentary on this list because it's important. To require a citizens review board to review and report police misconduct. If we don't have a voice about what they're doing, as long as internal affairs is the place where these things are investigated, the police can't police the police. We need citizens review boards. There's only two more points on this United for Reform agenda with regard to police reform, but they have a full agenda on many other issues. We want to mandate gun violence, prevention, education, and training. All three are necessary. We need to prevent gun violence, we need to educate people on it, and we need to train officers not to be a part of it. And the last thing on the agenda is to push for the passage of hate crime statutes. People don't get to jump in a pickup truck and go hunting a grown man created in the image of God. I've talked a lot. Reverend Donna's going to share our state, county, and local calls to action.
Yes. Before I share those calls to action, I see some comments. You can feel free to use the video. And the next time Dr. Patterson is talking, I'm going to try to link to the video, but if not, I'll get it directly to you. You can visit our website. Like we said, the first video is on YouTube. It has since been outdated twice or many times over, but we'll get the new video to you. On state, county, and local levels, the Clergy Calling for Consequences Alliance stands in solidarity with one another, as well as officials and organizations who are willing to advocate for the following: recruiting, training, and promoting law enforcement personnel that possess the psychological, emotional, and cultural, which is so important, cultural capacity for law enforcement work, and assess them every 3 years to ensure that they have maintained that capacity. So it's a constant re-evaluation to make sure those officers are fit psychologically, emotionally, and culturally fit for duty. And then also on our worship places, we equip and empower congregations and communities to join us in doing justice in their neighborhoods. You know, if one neighborhood is doing the work and another neighborhood is doing the work and the neighboring neighborhood is doing the work, soon it catches fire and all the neighborhoods are doing the work. And so we equip and empower congregations to join us in doing work in their neighborhoods through such initiatives as Faith in Action, which is at First Baptist Church of Vienna, in Virginia, where Pastor Vernon C. Walton is the senior pastor, and they're doing great work there in Virginia. And the truth is, we can all be doing great work in the places where we are.
Yes, we offer Faith in Action as an example because Dr. Walton is one of our Clergy Calling for Consequences participants. The other items, we want to give credit where credit is due. The recruiting and training came from Dr. DeForest Buster Suarez at First Baptist Lincoln Gardens. He has a 7-point plan that you can find on the church's website and other places connected with Dr. Suarez. As Reverend Donna said initially, we are joining with the Congressional Black Caucus on a national level and United for Reform. So I want to just tell you the organizations that are a part of United for Reform. It's Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority, the Links Incorporated, the National Council of Negro Women, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the Black Women's Agenda, the National Cares Mentoring Movement, the Girlfriends Incorporated, Jack and Jill of America, Top Ladies of Distinction, and the Black Women's Roundtable. It's more than 5 million collective voices with that agenda. And it also has voter reform on there. And we can't talk about police reform and not mention voter reform. We need to make our voices heard. We need elected officials like Governor Cuomo, who would call for a Say Their Names bill that bans chokeholds throughout the state of New York, and who would go further and require every mayor to have comprehensive police reform. We don't need leaders who will divide and deny and avoid taking action that brings justice to the fore. So the video that you asked about, as Reverend Donna stated, we will get the new one uploaded to YouTube, but in the meantime, you can find it on either one of our websites. Mine is setcaptivesfree.com and hers is
ReverendDonnaO.com.
Clergy, please feel free to join us. People who are not clergy, lay people who love the Lord, you are invited to be a part of this movement by taking the calls to action. For Breonna Taylor, by texting ENOUGH to 55156. And please stay tuned for the action that we can take to get justice for Rayshard Brooks and for Robert Fuller.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Clergy Calling for Consequences screening and conversation. We're delighted that you have joined us. We're more delighted that you will participate in the action steps. And we look forward to, as Dr. Patterson says, moving onward to change the trajectory.
Absolutely. And please, if your church is not part of this fight, urge them to become so.